right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Sad Dad Games podcast. My name is Eric.
I'm Shan.
I'm Tucker.
Hey, have you noticed, Eric, that you started coming in with a lot more energy lately? You might actually get people listening.
I might. You know what? It's all about the... Here, let me try again. I'll do it how I normally do it. Hang on. I'm going to turn my chair around and I'll come in. I'll do it how I... Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sad Dad Games podcast. I don't know if this is a funny joke. I'm gonna.
Do you want to listen to me for 30 minutes?
For indie games now.
Please subscribe. I like indie games.
Low energy Eric over
Spot
here.
on.
Low energy Eric. Well, it doesn't help that we record these. I'm in a later time zone. I'm 2 hours ahead of you guys, and so we usually record these at a much later time for me. It's currently midnight 05, which is about an hour past Eric's bedtime. So
There's an easy fix. You could just move back to live in the same time zone as us.
No, thank you.
Where everyone else is, and the air is terrible.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, there are many other states in the same time zone. You could just pick one of those states.
You know what? I really like North Carolina.
The amount of life that you would lose in your life expectancy from, like, breathing terrible air, you would gain back from having friends near you. Like, I'm pretty sure that
it evens out.
Table that like decides how long you live and die, like I think those things cancel each other out.
Yeah, it's the same. That sounds right. I've got no reason to believe
Shan
that the
and I are going
science
to
on
die
that
at
doesn't
42,
track.
but at least we have friends that are close.
But you would have died at 42, but because you have friends, it's 43 and a half.
Yeah.
So one of us will have somebody at the funeral.
Yeah.
I'll be there for both
Eric.
of them. You guys won't be there for mine. Yeah. I'll live way longer because of the nice clean air here. Yeah.
The flight's so expensive.
Anyways, this is another episode of Eric's Indie Corner, and the indie game that we're going to be talking about today is something that I have been excited about. I've been saving for the right time, and this episode should be sandwiched in between. We're doing a series of several episodes about some of our favorite The Legend of Zelda games, and this one is scheduled to come out in between those. And so today we are talking about drumroll. Oh yeah, give me a drum roll. Snare drum. I shouldn't have to specify. So we're talking about Cadence of Hyrule, and to give it its full name, this is its full actual name that it was given. Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the NecroDancer, featuring The Legend of Zelda. That's
very
the name
easy
of
to
the
remember.
game. Yeah, very easy to remember.
You almost died.
I almost passed out just saying the name of the game. So Cadence of Hyrule is a top-down rhythm action platformer. Anyone who might have played just the regular Crypt of the NecroDancer, this is sort of like a pseudo sequel to that game, but it is a rhythm game that you play as the Legend of Zelda characters. It's developed by a studio called Brace Yourself Games and came out on June 13th, 2019. This is every time anything Zelda comes out, I'm very excited, but I was particularly excited about this game because it was a big deal for Nintendo, who is notoriously they keep a really tight grip on their IPs. They don't like to lend them out. They don't really, like other people working on their games unless it's a studio that's contracted specifically to make a game for them. But this is an indie studio, Brace Yourself Games, making a game with one of Nintendo's biggest intellectual properties, The Legend of Zelda, and had never been done before. It's very cool that they did that.
I think
they use Grezzo for some of their remakes and remasters.
No, I mean
and then they did Hyrule Warriors.
Oh, Hyrule Warriors.
Warriors.
Yeah, that's a Koei Tecmo.
Okay. Is that an indie studio of sorts? Or
no, they're bigger. They do all of the Dynasty Warriors games, and they've done Fire Emblem Warriors. They've done a lot of collaborative stuff with Nintendo, that's also a very cool thing. That was when the first Hyrule Warriors came out. That was one of the first times that they had let a big studio do a Zelda spinoff. With the exception of Capcom made a few Game Boy Color and then a Game Boy Advance Zelda game, so those are some of the best ones. They should
the Seasons
Minish
game,
Cap,
right?
Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, and Minish Cap were all developed by Capcom. Nintendo should totally let Capcom make more top-down Zelda games because all three of those games rule.
And Capcom is objectively the best publisher that exists right now.
They are. I feel like we talk about this every time we record, but Capcom's friggin' killing it lately. They're just hit after hit. They can't lose.
High quality, just
good games.
They always push their individual genres forward. They are fully fledged out games, very creative. How do you take Resident Evil 4, one of the most important games in gaming history, and you turn it into the best remake ever made? Like
It's
it's nonstop success.
Yeah, we'll have to, on our regular series, we'll have to, I don't know exactly how we'll cover Resident Evil 4, but and the Resident Evil 4 remake, but I feel like that has to be something that we play sooner or later. Those games are amazing.
It's gonna be
But
no
anyways,
fewer than 10 episodes, even though there's very thin story.
5 hours per episode, 12 episodes each. We're just going to play the game live.
3 or 4 episodes on one day of Abby and The Last of Us Part 2. I think we could probably stretch
We could probably
the
do
whole game into 3 episodes.
Probably talk about each of the amazing bosses in that game one at a time.
That could take a long time.
Yeah.
So anyways, switch tracks back to The Legend of Zelda.
Good luck.
Get us back on track here. So Cadence of Hyrule, very cool game. It is like I said, a top-down rhythm adventure game, and it's the story is very simple. Just to kind of get you on the thing. The player character wakes up in the world as the character named Cadence, who was the main character from the Crypt of the NecroDancer game. So not a Zelda character. She's from Crypt of the NecroDancer. It gives you a quick tutorial, and then you realize that there is a villain called Octavo who is tormenting Hyrule. And so Cadence goes and wakes up either Link or Zelda. You can choose who you want to start the adventure with. And then once they've chosen your hero, you go out on an adventure to defeat Octavo's 4 champions. So you go to 4 different dungeons throughout Hyrule. You defeat the champions, you gather the musical instruments, and then you can use those musical instruments to get to the final area in Hyrule Castle, fight the boss and all that stuff. So it's a pretty classic like Zelda setup. It's not super... It's a very simple story compared to most Zelda games, but it really is to just kind of set the stage for this really unique style of gameplay that this is, aside from the other Crypt of the NecroDancer, is really the only game like this that I've ever played. It's incredibly unique. So to talk about that uniqueness, I'm going to do my best to describe the gameplay. So basically, you have the whole overworld map of Hyrule, which is at the beginning of each playthrough is randomly generated from what I believe are like a set of preset screens. So the screens that the dungeons appear on are all the same, and then the rest of Hyrule is randomly generated. But it's not randomly generated. Like every time you die and you come back, it's not a new Hyrule. It's like when you start a new game, like start the whole game all the way over, then there's that Hyrule, and it stays the same for that entire playthrough. But it's different each playthrough, which I think is fun. It gives it a little bit of freshness. But you start in Hyrule and you're on a grid, and your character hops around on a grid to the beat of the music, and there are enemies, and you try to hop around and you attack enemies by like bumping into them, by bumping your character into them, and they attack you by doing the same to you. And so it's this kind of... Every game is a fast-paced, or every screen is a fast-paced puzzle where you're trying to damage the enemies without getting damaged by them. And you're picking up, items, and, it's a very interesting kind of game. And I haven't played anything with gameplay quite like it. It's really
Is it
cool
like
stuff.
third-person Dance Revolution combat?
Kind of. I mean, you're not like using your feet, you're using a controller, but like your character is hopping around to the beat of the music, and you're trying to attack enemies to the beat of the music. You have a multiplier. If you do things to the beat, you do more, you get more rewards once you clear the screen of all the enemies and stuff like that. So it's very much like a rhythm game. It incentivizes you to follow the rhythm, but it's combined with like this simplified, not simplified, but this like puzzle combat combination where there is the puzzle, and the puzzle is how do I defeat all of these enemies without getting hit, or with getting hit as little as possible. And that's how you navigate through the overworld to find these dungeons where these the bosses lie, and then you can get their musical instruments to go to the castle and fight the final boss. So it's very, very fun that way. It also has like a pretty typical Zelda progression where you find your different items. Like you need the flippers so that you can hop across the water to get to different areas and things like that. So there's these chunky items that you collect as you go throughout your quests that expand your skill set, which is very Zelda. It feels very much like a classic Zelda adventure in that way, which I really like.
So this term is starting to stick, and I like it because it's my term, right? But chunky items, I feel like we just need to establish what it means. I just feel like it's something that classic games had that new games don't, and it's where like these old games, like somewhat low fidelity and simplistic in aesthetics and stuff, and like you didn't have a whole lot of things that you could collect, like RPGs having a whole bunch of items and stuff. Like you just had like single items that were powerful and very intentional, and they had very big uses in the game. And this would be any Zelda game. This would be like Animal Well accomplished this very well. But like I love the term chunkiness because it feels like these items mattered, and when you got it you felt like you unlocked something meaningful. And it's like I feel like I just don't get that in modern games. Like these items, and they always, like, when you get it, like it would put the item in like a black box
Banana. Yeah.
or something. It's like for some reason they felt so important, and you open up your item screen, you're like, these are my important items, this is my shit, right? Like I miss that about games, items being meaningful and intentional, and having all these like multiple purposes that you can engage with throughout the entire game for solving puzzles and stuff. So chunky items, chunky because it's significant and it mattered.
Yes. So there's a lot of chunky items in this game that you need to progress and that feel meaningful. There are also a lot of inconsequential items that make going through dungeons that make going through dungeons easier. So there are some extremely light roguelike elements to this game, which is something that I'm not usually a huge fan of roguelikes, but I like them a lot here because instead of like it's Zelda. It's also a good way to get me to try a roguelite is to slap an IP on it that I love. That's a pretty good bet for me. And I don't love any IPs better than Zelda. It's my favorite. And so, but I like it here because it's not really a roguelite. When you die, you don't really lose progress. You lose some of your unimportant items and your money. But you're like, all of the chunky items that you've obtained, all of the like the progress that you've made in the story, like the instruments that you've collected from the bosses, that all remains. You just have to go back to wherever you died and try that one small section again. And so it doesn't even feel like a roguelike. It feels more just like having a slightly heavier punishment for death than you would in like a video game where you normally progress through. So you lose things like you have like little boots equipped that give you maybe a stat multiplier, or you don't get hurt by lava or something like that. And when you die, you'll lose those boots. Or like you have a torch that lets you see what items are inside of treasure chests before you open them. And when you die, you might lose that torch. So it's like little items like that help kind of amplify your gameplay experience, but don't gate your progress. You can lose those when you die. And so you go to these dungeons, you fight the bosses, and the bosses in this game are an absolute highlight. And I don't want to tell you all of them because they're so fun, but I will tell you one of them. They take classic Zelda enemies and they combine them with a musical theme or an instrument. For example, one of the bosses that you fight is called a Wizrobo. And I love it so much. It's a mix between a Wizrobe and an oboe, and it cracks me up every time you fight the Wizrobo. And they have, all of the bosses are like that. They're very punny, and not just that, is they take the musical instruments that their name is based on, and it impacts their move set and the kind of music that plays while you're fighting them. It's all very clever and very intentionally tied to the music and soundtrack of this game, which is spectacular.
Yeah, that's one thing that's like instrumental to any Zelda game, is like the music has to elevate it in a way that makes it feel bigger than life. And it's like, yes, I still love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but like you need music that slaps. And like the recent Zelda games just don't have Koji Kondo written all over it. That's all, that's the problem. And so it's like when a game respects that, like the music is the most important thing to Zelda and everything else like is elevated because of it, then it just makes it a hoot, You need
it just makes it that much better. Yeah.
You need to feel the adventure. You need to feel it the entire time coursing through your veins.
So I will take a minute here to talk about how great the music is. So music, the original soundtrack was composed by Dave Baranowski. Excellent soundtrack. They take a lot of the classic Zelda tunes and they just kind of amp them up. They have this sort of like slight electronic techno-y sort of feel to them. So they're thumping and they're they make you, bob your head while you're going. And every single time I played this game, obviously I'm playing a game, so I'm sitting still on my couch, but every single time I play this game, I would get a notification from my watch that was like, it would like beep beep, and it'd be like, hey, your heart rate is really high and you're not moving. Are you okay? It's like, I'd like get a warning on my watch that was just like your heart rate's high, maybe calm down. But it was just because I'm playing this game, and I was like my heartbeat was like, yeah, just like really getting in sync with the music, so much so that it might have caused permanent vascular damage. Who knows? But I thought that was funny.
Yeah, the only problem I have while playing games, it's usually with it's really only platformers where I engage physically while I'm playing. And so it's like I've reduced it to where there's only one thing I can't shake. And it's like whenever I'm jumping the farthest distance that a character can make to another platform, the small of my back arches and stiffens up as if I'm jumping.
Well, that's how it helps them jump farther. You got to stretch your back out, or they might not make the jump.
Yeah. Does anybody else engage physically with games while they're playing other than music games? Because that's one that I wish I could get over.
I bet if you asked Liz, she probably would have an answer for you. I don't know if I do or not, but I'm sure that I do little things. Like, I know that I verbally react a lot when I play games. Like if something surprises me or like upsets me, or like, oof, I make a lot of little noises to myself. That's probably what I do most.
That's the wrong kind of hard.
Yeah.
As Eric would say.
I've heard that.
There are
so many
different
times
kinds of hard in video games. There is a difficult, if a game is difficult because it's designed that way to be challenging and satisfying, then that's a good thing. But if a game is just pissing me around and just throwing 1,000 enemies at, like, oh, how do we make the game harder? I bet it'd be harder with 100 enemies in between here and there that all have 1,000,000 health. Yeah, that would be harder. It's also not fun. That's the wrong kind of hard.
Yeah, the wrong kind of hard. We need a shirt that says that. But
yeah, everyone knows that Eric hates
sexual.
Everyone knows that Eric hates the wrong kind of hard.
Somewhere.
Yeah. I only want the right kind of hard. Yeah.
But in this porno, Eric's just the fluffer.
Yeah. That's exactly my role. So the music.
He's the wrong kind of hard.
I'm the wrong kind of hard. Okay. So, music in this game is really excellent. They have a lot of really great remixes of existing songs. There's a whole area that's the Gerudo Desert, and to no one's surprise, the theme for the Gerudo Desert absolutely slaps. It's a remix of everyone's favorite Zelda song. So they remix some of those songs in very kind of punchy, jumpy ways, and they also use some songs in clever ways to help you solve puzzles. So there are some puzzles where you might have to jump on music notes in a certain order to play a classic Zelda tune, like the Song of Storms or something, and that might solve a puzzle in a certain area. So there's lots of puzzles incorporated into this as well, which I really appreciated. Like sometimes you'll get to a screen that's full of enemies and there's a heart piece up on a ledge, and you're like, you have to puzzle out how to, maybe get to that heart piece. And so it has elements that it's the gameplay is that of a rhythm game, but the vibe and the feel is it feels like a classic top-down Zelda adventure, even though the gameplay is quite different. So it scratched my Zelda itch, which is something that I'm always looking for. I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Well, and we needed it at the time this game released because there wasn't any Zelda IP around this time.
Yeah, it had been 2 years since Breath of the Wild, and that was a very different style of Zelda. So this one was a breath of fresh air of some kind of old school Zelda feelings. Yeah,
which we needed.
Also, I want to give a quick shout out to the art style. I think that this game might be the best looking pixel art Zelda game out there. Absolutely stunning, just really, really excellent pixel art. They have this kind of slightly bulbous style to all of the enemies where they all look sort of puffed up and like slightly cutesy, but not so cutesy. But all of the enemy design is very clever, and a lot of the time the enemy design kind of helps inform you of how they move, because enemies all have different moving patterns. Like, this kind of enemy will only jump towards you every other beat. And this kind of enemy jumps towards you on every beat, but they move in like diagonal patterns rather than straight front and back. And then these ones will maybe throw something at you and then wait a beat and then jump somewhere else. And so it's like all of the enemies move in different ways and have different kinds of patterns. And so it's fun to kind of watch them and unlock and figure out an optimal path to get rid of all of these enemies without getting hit yourself. And their character designs and their animations all do a good job of communicating those things to you. So art design, just as good as the music design, if that's even possible.
Yeah, what I love about like the character design is that like it's what if we had N64 Zelda and beyond, but like in pixel art form, and we've literally never had that. Like even Minish Cap, like it gets kind of close, but like this gets like the right blonde hair, and Minish Cap went like pure blonde instead of dirty blonde, and it's just like it feels like miniature, almost cheapy versions of like the most classic version of the Link and Zelda that we actually know. And but yeah, I like they use a very vibrant palette for everything, even the background, but they're able to make that work by putting like bold black outlines around characters to make them pop out from that. So it's a very happy, vibrant, lively aesthetic that really complements the energy that you need going into it with like the music and stuff. So you're just always feeling very alive.
Yeah. No, it's breathtaking. The visuals are really, they do such a good job of bringing that kind of pixel art, but making it feel modern and new and exciting. And so really enjoy the visual design of this game, and the animation is all really great as well, because everything's like hopping around, and so there's like a little bounce to kind of how everyone moves, because all the characters are hopping around on a grid. So that's very, very satisfying.
And it's like it's basically a Link to the Past, but with like a polished veneer, and like things are more
with like modern pixel graphics. Yeah, it's very much that kind of a vibe. It feels like Link to the Past if Link to the Past was made with modern pixel sensibilities.
Yeah.
So yeah, this game, very, very cool. I wanted to give a special mention as well. There is a crazy, well, here, so first we'll talk about the DLC. So there was a few packs of DLC for this game, which is very cool. There was a character pack which introduced 5 more playable characters, including Impa, Shadow Link, Shadow Zelda, and then from the NecroDancer games, there's Frederick and Arya, so even some NecroDancer characters, which is pretty cool. Frederick is the shopkeeper also in Cadence of Hyrule, so he's the shopkeeper in both games, and so being able to play as him is fun, because he's this little shopkeeper man, and he's always singing very loud opera. So you'll be like hopping around in a dungeon, and then you hear someone going like blah la 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 la, and you're like, oh, Frederick's around here somewhere. I can go buy some bombs or what. Like, so he's got that, like, you can hear his little voice yelling out through the dungeons, and so when you play as him, he like sings and hums as he jumps around, and it's really adorable.
Reminds me of Hollow Knight when you're trying to find the map maker.
The cartographer, and he'll be like humming quietly to himself. Yeah, so it's kind of like that, where it helps you kind of find him, and you know that you're close to him. So there was that pack, which is super cool, and then they added a melody pack, this is something that I completely didn't know about until I replayed this game about a week ago to get ready for this episode, and I discovered this as I was replaying it. They released a melody pack, which they had 3 guest composers come on, A Rival, Family Jewels, and Chip Zell. And they completely rearranged their own versions of the entire soundtrack. And so you can select which version of the soundtrack you want to listen to. And it's like 2 of them are sort of like different versions of electronica kind of house style music. And then the one by Family Jewels is a metal remix. And so you can just go through this entire game listening to heavy metal versions of these Zelda songs, and it's awesome. It's so cool.
The things you've sent us, like the little sound clips, have been amazing.
I was so excited while I was playing it. In the group chat, I'm sending them these songs that are like, there's metal music in this Zelda game, and it's so good. So Family Jewels was my favorite guest composer in this. Very cool.
Was that what was happening in that thread, like I got so far behind.
You should go back and listen to him.
You shouldn't have gotten 4 text messages behind.
Yeah,
it's impossible to catch up after
that's
that.
Tucker's job. So go back, listen to them. They're really cool. But I thought that was such a cool way to do for a rhythm game. That's really cool. DLC is adding some variety to the music, especially for a game like this where there's a lot of replayability. People are, there's a lot of incentive to come back and play. It's here's 3 whole different, I guess total of 4. So the original and then 3 extra versions of the soundtrack that you can switch between at will, which is super cool. You have different versions of the soundtrack. And then they released the final piece of DLC, which is called Symphony of the Mask, which was an entire extra story campaign featuring Skull Kid. With music from kind of Majora's Mask sort of things. And I love, my 2 favorite Zelda races are the Gorons and the Deku Scrubs. I love Deku Scrubs. I think they're adorable. And so it was very fun to have a story kind of centered around Skull Kid and the forest and seeing more Deku Scrub stuff. So that was a fun one.
Are
as well.
the Bulbasaurs of the Hyrule.
I know. They don't get nearly enough love.
Yeah.
So I definitely am a Zora
false.
fan.
There's a song about not wanting any scrubs, and I'm pretty sure they're talking about Deku Scrubs.
Deku Scrubs.
How,
Girls,
that
they can't
proves
get
my
no
point.
scrubs from me.
They don't want the scrubs.
I don't want no scrubs. A
They
scrub is a
don't.
guy
They
that
want
can't
to
get
go
no love
chase.
from me.
They want to go chasing waterfalls where the Zora are at.
You don't just say creep creep without quoting TLC.
Yeah.
I don't
I don't understand the
what you're
reference.
talking about. I don't understand the reference.
Don't understand it. Don't get it. Well, so I like that a lot. Seeing Deku Scrubs always makes me happy. I feel like they are woefully underrepresented in Zelda games, especially as NPCs that you can talk to. So anytime that happens, I'm here for it. Big fan of that. So lots of cool DLC that you can buy separately or all bundled together. But that was really fun for me to see. And with that, there are also a crazy amount of different modes for this game. And I wrote them all down because the actual story mode of the game you can beat in probably 6 to 8-ish hours if you're just kind of going through it pretty quick. But there's so much extra to do in this game. There's a story mode, which is just the standard story. You go through it. Then there's Octavio's Ode, which you play as the main villain, Octavo, and you can go through kind of an alternate story that runs concurrent to the normal, but you're playing as Octavo, and so it's a whole extra story mode, which is cool. There's Symphony of the Mask that I just talked about, the DLC mode with Skull Kid. There's a single character mode where you pick one character. You can play through sort of a version of the story mode with that character. There's dungeon mode where the overworld is replaced by one big dungeon, and the dungeons are all randomized enemy-filled areas. So you can play dungeon mode, which is much more reminiscent of the original Crypt of the NecroDancer game, where everything is one big dungeon and you don't get any respite. It's just all monsters all the time, huge dungeon. And so there's that cool mode. And there's all character mode where you can play that same mode, but you use characters act as lives. You move through each character in order. There's daily challenges as well, where it starts you with a random seed, and you pick a random character, and you just have to see how far you can get. And then once you die, that run is over forever. So daily challenge mode. There's puzzle mode that puts you in a puzzle-centric dungeon that has you solving rhythm-based puzzles. And then there's arena mode, which is the same kind of thing, but it's just combat, waves and waves of combat, and you see how far you can get, which is so even though the story mode is sort of short, there's crazy amounts of modes, and you can customize your game. There's all sorts of different modifiers and options, since the map can be randomized and the dungeons can be randomized for all those people who love to play roguelike games and randomize your seed and stuff like that. There's all sorts of cool options for that. So it's an infinitely replayable game with all sorts of crazy options to modify your experience. So very cool. Lots of replay value. Lots and lots to do outside of just the story. Yep.
Shan, were you laughing
lost
at
me
being
at
seated?
Yeah, I said
lost me
randomize your seed, and I could see Shan snickering to himself.
Why, yes, I'm fully seated.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I like to
Yeah.
go spread my seed.
Yeah.
I like it when other people enjoyed the same seed that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I get that impression from you. Yeah.
That's how Shan became a dad, spreading his seed.
That's exactly it.
They're your wild
but
oats. You can do whatever you
IVF
want.
style. So
Yeah.
that's how I spread my seed clinically. And expensively. Anyway.
All right. Well, so like I said, about 5 to 8 hours of playtime, but you can really pad that out with all the different modes. It's available only on Nintendo Switch, because, Zelda, not going to be available on other platforms. And then the price, it goes for $24.99, and then you get the season pass, which includes all of the DLC for $14.99, or as a bundle for $39.98. And it's an awesome game. Super cool to see a big Zelda IP or a big Nintendo IP being used or developed by an indie studio. And I'm a big fan of this. Super love Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the NecroDancer featuring The Legend of Zelda.
I'm irrationally frustrated that the bundle does not cost even a little bit less than just the two separate apps
Yeah,
together.
it's a very Nintendo thing.
Yeah.
Like, it really should have been like $35 instead of... It's literally to the penny the exact same amount as if you just bought them separately.
At least you don't feel
If it was
cheated
1
if you buy
cent
it
cheaper,
later.
I would be okay with it. But
Yeah.
when it's the exact same, I just...
Nope, literally the exact same amount of money. Very Nintendo of them.
Don't
So-
dilute your value by driving down your own price. They understand the game. It's frustrating, but they get it. They have
get
a
it.
moat. They have an ecosystem. They have carved it out. Nobody can drive them down in price. They own it.
When they just go, oh, well, why don't you just go play The Legend of Zelda somewhere else then? Oh, wait. And you can't.
No, because we have an ecosystem, and F you.
Yep. Well, I think that's going to do it for us today, you guys. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Eric's Indie Corner. I always love talking about indie games, in particular indie games that involve The Legend of Zelda. Two of my favorite things, Legend of Zelda indie games. And you smush them
And this
together.
is the only one.
And it's the only Legend of Zelda indie game. I mean,
You
there's
have
lots of
nothing to
indie
look
games
forward to in your
inspired
life
by
anymore.
Zelda. What?
You have nothing to look forward to in your life
That's it.
anymore.
It's the only
You've
thing.
climaxed.
Until the Cadence of Hyrule Crypt of the NecroDancer featuring The Legend of Zelda 2.
Yeah. Eric, I really want to play with your seed.
Okay.
It sounds like you had a fantastic time, especially when you reached that climax that you were
You
just
know,
talking
I
about.
usually just let the game do the seed for me. I don't generate a lot of my own seed. It's generally not how I deal with
I
things.
So
am
you're more of a
overflowing with
submissive
seed.
bottom.
Yeah. It's
I'm
generally
a
how I
power
go.
bottom. It'd be complimentary if we.
That was a quick left turn into homoeroticism.
All right, you guys. That's going to do it for us today. Please listen to our regular series every Thursday or every Monday, and Eric's Indie Corners every Thursday. Like, comment, and subscribe. If you like what we're doing, leave us a comment. If you'd like to see us try something new or have a game that you really love and you want me to talk about on Eric's Indie Corner, drop it in the comments, and maybe I'll play it. Maybe I've already played it. You can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also on YouTube. And we're on Instagram as well. I post my daily data scores every single day on Instagram. Check them out and try to beat them. Bet you can't, because I'm better than you. I challenge you to beat me.
Have we had anybody try to beat you yet?
No, and I want
Nobody's
them to
trying
do
to
it.
beat you off, Dadish?
Not a single
Yeah,
person.
no one tries to beat me off during Dadish. It's something about the randomized seed, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, where it's like there's already too much seed out there. Why
Yeah.
beat
Yeah,
you
it's
off
just-
harder?
Yeah. All right, everybody. Bye.
Outro. Bleepy doof, bleepity bloopity blow.